What's good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. In episode 3, we talked about how to make this sound, and in part 4 of the Comprehensive Guide to Neuro-based series, season 3, we're going to be talking about how to turn this second macro that we have here into a generator. Now, if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you go back and you watch the second part, because that's going to be giving you the neuro-based aspect parts of this. I also have Season 1, which is probably my most popular video on YouTube, and Season 2, which covers the Aberrance pack. But in Season 3, this is kind of showcasing how I made the Eternum preset pack that's available on alckemy.com, showing you how to combine pretty much all of the elements that I've been doing of sound design lately regarding neurobases of both generative aspects and then also like crazy filtering, processing, and stuff. So yeah, go watch all the content. Hang out on my channel. It helps a lot. Speaking of, if you guys can and you like my content, please do me a favor, like and subscribe and interact with my content. It helps me with the algorithm and it helps me continue to do awesome videos like this. So I actually already recorded this video previously, but my audio crapped out, and that means that we get to do it again from scratch. So to build off of that, there's a couple of different things that we can do in order to achieve some interesting results. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about randomizers in part 1 and 2 and 3, and we are going to kind of continue to develop off that theme, except we're going to do something a little bit different here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to the pitch here up to maybe 24. And the reason why I'm going to keep it at 24 or that amount is just because it's not too drastic, but if you're doing this with pitch bending, it'll kind of, you can make it more dramatic in that way. However, the more important thing that we need to do with this is that once we have the modulator on here, we need to come over to this set and make sure that macro 2 is modulating how much this goes. And the reason why is because whenever we have this off, we want to make sure that the fundamental is playing at the pitch it's supposed to be, which is F, and it's always F. But whenever we turn this on, it should be starting to do some other things kind of like this. As you can tell. So we're going to need one more of these things too, because I think that what I want to do is I want to change the speed of this just a little bit and make sure that it's not kind of the same thing. And again, what I'm trying to pull from the meaning of generator is I want the most variety of sound that I can pull out of this as possible. So as you can tell, this is going to kind of start to do its own thing and have some fun with it. And there is pretty much the first aspect to that. So now that we have that and it's creating different pitches and stuff, what we're going to do is pull up another instance of multipass. And this is going to be more so catered towards kind of, I guess, more effects that are going to be focused on changing the pitch side of things and also the stereo aspect. But really, as opposed to trying to make the sound cooler, it's more so about like, how do we break the sound the most? So one easy way that we can do that is by grabbing something kind of like a pitch shifter. If you grab this at 100% and we take a listen to how this sounds, just, well, I guess, observe. Sorry, one thing that I forgot to do is map this to the master mix here. I was like, why isn't this working? So now that this is on 100%, then this will actually start to do things. So we can pretty much take something that sounds interesting like that and grab this here and go into the full range. Actually, let's not do that. Let's go into like half range here and then set this to be normal. So this is going to go up 12 and down 12 respectively. The other thing that we're going to do, kind of like what we did in the last video, is we're going to grab this and just set this macro to the speed of these here, kind of like so. And then at some point we will add another randomizer here to mess with the speed to manipulate that even further. So the pitch shifter is great, and there are a lot of different things you can do, and sometimes it might even be worth like stacking these in some way or another. So maybe what I'll do is I'll grab the other one here and I will set this to go the opposite way, kind of like so. And you never really know what you're going to get whenever you start to mess with stuff like this. And sometimes like even messing with the grain size can give you some interesting things too. So cool. I don't think that we need to keep that, but just as a means of exploration, I am doing this from scratch and I'm not recreating the same exact thing that I did last time, so bear with me, yeah? So one thing that I do think would be cool though is messing with the comb filter, and this, when it's set at 100%, can end up getting us some interesting results. So let's take a listen to that. So let's go ahead and grab one of those and kind of just set that to do what it wants to, kind of there, but let's go ahead and set that to minus and turn the stereo on. Interesting. So that seems pretty cool to me, and now maybe what we can kind of focus on is going between some of this stuff to try to get some interesting, I guess, artifacts. And that's really kind of like what I'm looking for within this stuff, is just to see like how many artifacts or what kinds of artifacts I can pull from that, if that makes sense. So I turned this down just a little bit so that way it doesn't go past the point that it was originally at, because if you get into too much distortion, then, well, you ruin the sound in the wrong way. But Alckemy, we're trying to ruin the sound. Yeah, I know, but there is a matter of taste to this. So the next thing that we'll take a look at is the delay. And typically in the past, what I've done is I've used it kind of like having short delays and stuff right here. But if you kind of build a stack of this, then sometimes you can end up getting some interesting stuff too. So maybe we'll take this one here on the midband, I guess, and then we'll duplicate that and then change that to, I guess, something different. Sure, doesn't really matter. But we'll grab the other one now from here, and then we'll start doing different stuff on this one. So let's take a listen to what that sounds like. Okay, that sounds pretty sweet. So let's go ahead and do some more stuff with this now. I think that it would be kind of cool if we turn the width down and that way forced everything into mono in that way. And then everything that we do that's processing after this stuff can kind of like go into maybe breaking that even more. Because like you've got phase cancellation that's obviously super apparent through all the stereo things that we're doing here. But if we kind of force everything down in that way and then maybe mess with some of the parameters here, then we can get something else that could be interesting. So I don't know, let's just pull that down and then see what that does. Okay, that's kind of cool, but a little bit overboard, yeah. Okay, that's pretty sick actually. So now what we can do is maybe think about doing something with Slice EQ over here. And I'm just going to do something nice and easy. That way it's not too difficult and too complicated. And again, like the thing about multipass and snap heap is that while we do have a lot of versatility, the thing that does hold us back is the fact that we can only modulate so many things between these two. I think like, I want to say maybe like 20 things, which to be fair, like is a whole lot. But at the same time, you'll find that you can kind of get through this pretty quickly. So on this, I just kind of created this little vocal looking thing, and that's just going to make this kind of do some talking. This goes and caters more towards the filter side of things, but if you kind of mess with this in this way, then you'll end up getting something that's kind of like this. Okay, pretty sweet. So now that we have something kind of like that, I think what I want to do is also modulate the feedback between these, or maybe not modulate the feedback, but just kind of mess with that because it's kind of overpowering the sound, right? Okay, that sounds a lot better to me actually, just by pulling off of the feedback. So maybe I'll do that on this one too, because I want it to be like kind of apparent, but not so much that it's just like, you know what I mean? It ends up just sounding like the actual effect that you have. So we'll go ahead and try something like this now, see what that does. And maybe I will pull this to 6 voices instead, because 16 is quite a bit. So let's take a listen to what that sounds like. Okay, that sounds pretty sweet. Let's go ahead and focus on the high band, and let's see if we can get some interesting movement through the chorus. All right, cool. So basically playing off of that stuff, now what we can do is kind of go into pulling the spread back just a little bit and then maybe adding some instances of reverb here, kind of like so. And again, like it doesn't really matter what you do at this point, like just try anything and everything. And that's really what this comes down to. We can also maybe focus on like putting this through maybe something like a non-linear filter. So maybe we can color this a little bit by placing this within a notch and then going into something like digital. And then maybe we can mess with, instead of this here, because we'll probably end up keeping that there, but maybe we can mess with kind of like the degree of what kind of distortion we apply through that. That looks good. And this actually belongs somewhere up here. So we'll take that and start to mess with that. And this way. And again, guys, I know that this sounds terrible right now, but it's okay, because at some point or another, when everything starts to click, it'll start to make a lot more sense and you'll be like, oh, that sounds so much cooler. But that's kind of part of it, is sometimes you just have to, it takes a while to get there. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to mess with this a bit. And I'm just going to leave this delay right here and let it do its own thing. But we will mess with the mix a bit, kind of in that sense. And then we'll also turn the ping pong on. So let's see if that does anything cool. Cool. All right, kind of like that. Let's go ahead and grab this over here and duplicate that over this way. And I think that is actually pretty darn awesome. But what we might want to think about now is figuring out a way to pull the sound back in order to control it a little bit tighter, because the delays and stuff that you have are really interesting in that way. So maybe one thing that we can try is actually messing with the feedback aspect of this. Okay, we've already done that. So let's go ahead and grab this one instead and start from there. That way it's not going to be doing that the whole time. But then what I also want to be thinking about doing is just figuring out other ways that we can try to get more kind of like, how do you say, like staccato glitches as well. And so one instance that you can do is, if you do it right, then you can get away with it. But basically, if you have this at 100%, then whenever you mess with this in this way, it's actually going to change the pitch. But you have to be careful, because sometimes it can be a little bit too prominent. So let me show you what I mean. So maybe what we can do is we can try to focus on pulling this down just a little bit, maybe like here, and then also keep it like very short in this way. And then maybe what I might even do is see if I can mess with the feedback, and let's see what this does. Okay, maybe what I might try as well is, instead of keeping it there, I might even pull it just after this one. Cool. You can also do this like on different bands as well. Like, let's say like it makes sense to do it on the whole band, but you can even start splitting this up to different things and make it go like absolutely insane by placing that same kind of idea of different pitches on here. So it kind of starts to break the rules of everything related to, I guess, like the frequency bands, right? Because these two, or I guess these three, if you had something like this, would just start to do its own thing completely. So take a listen to this. And so like if you have something kind of like that acting independently of all of the other bands, then you end up getting like just more stuff to play with. Which to me actually sounds okay. Now that we've got something like that, we can go ahead and grab any other randomizer. Let's just grab this one for keepsake, and then this one will manipulate the speed of macro 2. So that way, right now we have everything set up to where macro 1 is affecting the speed of the Neuro stuff, where that's kind of turned on. So this will kind of just act as independently of what's controlling the speed of macro 2. And I will say that like some part of me wanted to set that up that way on purpose, but you'll end up like seeing whenever you start working with randomizers about how you can kind of build synergies between stuff like that. And that's really what the cool part of this is just figuring out different synergies that these effects kind of can do to each other to see how you can pull the most, I guess, interesting stuff out of this. So let's go ahead and mess with this for just a little bit. I'm just going to hold F for a bit, and I'm going to start to mess with changing the Neuro knob, and then we also need to rename this to generator knob, or macro, or whatever you want to call it. And what I'm looking for isn't so much as what this sounds like when both of these are turned up to the max or to the bottom, but more so about what happens when we start subtly tweaking these in between. And that's where I think this will start to make the most sense. So let's go ahead and start from 0 and give it a shot. Okay, that does sound pretty cool to me, but I think I'm going to move some stuff around. So for one, I think that I'm going to move this over here. And then I also think that I am going to move that there and move this here. And then let's see what happens if I move the saturator to the top end. And that's the cool thing about multipass and faceplant in general, is that it makes it really easy for you to kind of mix and match and try to see like where, I guess, the right effects or the wrong effects or whatever kind of fit best. Like it might even be better to put the pitch shifter over way far to the right as well. And it, you know, there is no right or wrong. It just depends on how it sounds, but you can see like by doing this kind of stuff, like you will see that it will make a huge difference. So to me, I think that stuff actually sounds a lot cooler. And what we've done is we've kind of cleaned up the high end, except for the distortion aspect of it. We're focusing on like doing cool stuff to the middle, and you can kind of even do other and more things to it. But that's kind of where building a relationship with the effects and how they work with each other starts to come into play, right? Because maybe the saturator needs to be making noise sounds before it goes into the reverb, before it goes into the distortion, in order for it to get that specific timbre. Or maybe instead, the slice EQ needs to be somewhere over here, and the nonlinear filter should be over here somewhere, to kind of just see how what effect you, or what result you get from this affects, you know, this chain of effects. Does that make sense? Like, there's not really a right or wrong way to do this, but these are the kinds of things that I look for, that I try to be open-minded to whenever I'm creating sounds kind of like this in general. So So one thing that I actually really like about this in particular is that in some cases, now that the reverb is at the end along with the delay, you end up getting some really interesting, like wide sounding things. And so maybe one last thing that we can try is to just try to manipulate this there instead, so that way it's not always the same delay. Cool. And now that we have something like that, we can go back to trying to play between the Neuro and the generator aspects of that. Okay, I lied. Now, one thing I talked about from before was the fact that, like, with the delays and stuff, you get that crazy kind of like cutting sound, that pew, pew, and I don't really like. So instead, what I might try to focus on is only doing this maybe up to 0.5% on this. Okay, that sounds pretty darn cool. So let's listen to this really quick. All right, sick. So what I think I'm going to do on this, because it kind of sounds kind of like creepy and crawly, I guess, to some extent, is I will throw a disperser on here, and I'm going to mess with both the amount and also, maybe not that far, maybe like this far, but with the amount, and then also the, I guess, the pitch of this. So let me scroll down a little bit more. Maybe have just a little bit of pinch in general. And then one final thing that I think that we'll do just to make this super cool is we'll add a ring mod to this. And this is kind of to get like a cool, like creepy crawly sound, or to get a transformer sound depending on what you send through it. But if you turn the frequency down all the way and you mess with the spread, then you end up getting some interesting stuff kind of like this. And it's just subtle enough that you can't really like tell a whole lot about what it's doing. But I'm just going to set this up just a little bit. And maybe what I'll do is keep this at 100 or maybe 50%. Cool. And now when we play everything together, oh man. So one thing to consider is that this is MPE minded, so pushing one button between these two macros, or having the ability to control both of these macros just with the one press of the key, and then maybe messing with the pitch wheel of this, I guess, which is a third dynamic of the MPE, right? You get some crazy stuff. Now, I don't have my MPE controller on right now, but just messing with this, oh, dude, it's so cool. So the last thing that I want to talk about with this is that it doesn't have to be Neuro and generator. I was talking about this before with like rerouting things on multipass in the effects section as well, but you can also bring stuff over here in this way. It's going to take a second because it's moving a lot of effects at the same time. But sometimes putting the generator stuff before the neuro processing, or maybe somewhere in between, can also give you some really cool stuff. So let's take a listen to that. So I personally think that having the multipass at the end was better, but for you, it might be different. And now that you have something like this, you have some kind of cool thing to play with. And maybe let's say like you're listening to this and it sounds kind of cool, but maybe something is going wrong with the top end on here, right? Well, you can always like take stuff away. You can always turn things off. And that's really important to know that. And that's why it's also even more important that you're not trying to copy this patch, because it's more about showing you how to explore with sound design, about how to figure out how to build, I guess, a knowledge base or a database, or like whatever you want to call it, but just building an understanding between how all these things work together. And to me, that's why Faceplant is probably the best learning tool for sound design in general, because it has such a wide range of effects and allows you to just stack things and put them together super efficiently. All in all, let's go ahead and play that sound one more time just because I'm having a good time. And that's pretty much how I make a neuro generator MPE minded thing. So thank you all so much for watching. Again, please, please, please do me a favor and interact with my content. If you don't like the video, then, I mean, feel free to dislike too. Tell me why you don't like the video, if it's too long or too boring or something, but any interaction that you guys can have, I would always appreciate. And I'm trying to still build up to that 10K subs, man. It's definitely been a long journey. We still have 2 more parts to cover, by the way. In the next section, we're going to cover external processing outside of Faceplant. And then part 6, we'll talk about contextualization, which might be the one that are like, I feel like all of these videos are like the one that people are looking for, but I can only cover so much information in one video rather. So thank you guys again for watching my content. And if you guys want to support the channel, then consider becoming a member or buying something off alckemy.com, which kind of highlights these kinds of sounds with my new Eternum pack. It's pretty awesome. Put a lot of love into it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.